Hey guys, it's Alex, and yes, sorry, I trimmed the beard a little bit, trying to change it up. Today I wanted to talk about a subject that a lot of Ford versus Chevy guys go in on, especially online. Now recently I've been making some posts on Instagram, and every single time I make a post on Instagram touting the Coyote or something like that because I think the Coyote engine is excellent. Ford did a real good job, they knocked it out of the park. There's always one or two GM guys that go in there and then they pop off on some dumb stuff like, oh, stock 4.8, you can get it from a junkyard or a 5.3 or 6.0 and make 1,000 horse. And they cannot make that power without aftermarket heads or aftermarket cams. Whereas the Coyote in stock form, meaning the engine itself with boost, has made 1,000 horsepower. VMP did it, Hellion did it, Lund Racing did it. Everyone has done it. So it's a pretty great platform in my opinion. But the Chevy guys always say the same thing. 5.3, 6.0, $500, 7 seconds. Really, they don't tell you about the billet crank, the heads, the cams, all that stuff. They don't tell you anything like that. And that's fine, whatever. But what happens is I like to engage a lot of people to have a conversation, and subsequently the conversation goes back and forth, and they always go back to the bailout. Ford guys tell GM guys, look, you guys took a bailout. You guys took a bailout. You're Government Motors. GM is Government Motors. And you can't say anything. You can't talk any smack or any crap because your company, Chevy, took a bailout. Then the Chevy guys go, Ford took a bailout too. Ford took a bailout too. They just go ape shit. So I thought to myself, let me Google this because I'm pretty sure, I lived through that era and I have good listening comprehension. When someone tells me something or I read something, reading and listening comprehension, I usually get what they're trying to tell me. So I thought that GM and Chrysler took bailouts. What's a bailout? A bailout means here's money, we don't want it back. We're going to probably take basically an interest in your company, whether it's a percentage so that we can have a stake in the game. It's like in the movie Carlito's Way. Remember when Carlito's Way, he goes into Sasso's bar and he says, hey, you owe money to the Italians, so I'm going to come in for this much money and I'm going to take half. He bailed him out. He didn't say, I'm going to give you a loan and you pay me back when you can, buddy, because I want to make interest. No. So I did a quick Google search, okay? And this is what I have right now in front of me, and I'm going to do some reading. And now the Google search, if you type in literally, did Ford take a bailout? Type that in. And it's probably going to take you to a couple of websites, and they all pretty much the same thing. But thebalance.com, it says thebalance.com/auto industry bailout, GM Ford Chrysler, explains it pretty well, and it gives you metrics and all this stuff. So let me do some reading for you guys. And I'm going to explain what I'm reading for you guys because a lot of you guys do not understand the words that are written in front of you, so that you need an interpreter for English. So it says the U.S. government bailout of the auto industry lasted from January 2009 to December 2013. The big three automakers, that's Ford, Chevy, Chrysler, approached Congress in November 2008. Remember 2008, for those of you that weren't old enough, 2008, we had a terrible economy, everything went to shit. And Ford and Chevy and Chrysler were like, hey man, we might need a hand because we're going to lose 1 million jobs out of Detroit if we don't get some kind of compensation or whatever. So they warned, the big three warned, without the bailout, General Motors Company and Chrysler faced bankruptcy and the loss of 1 million jobs. Now listen to that line really slowly. Without the bailout, General Motors and Chrysler would face bankruptcy without the bailout, not Ford. So the Ford Motor Company didn't need the funds since it had already cut costs. Ford already did a restructuring in that era. They cut costs, they streamlined a whole bunch of things. So they didn't need a bailout. But Ford asked to be included so it wouldn't suffer by competing with subsidized company. Half of you guys don't know what the hell that sentence even means. Subsidized means someone else is giving you money, like a sponsorship, okay? Ford didn't want to not take money because Chrysler, GM, we're going to get government money. And Ford's like, well, fuck that. Now we're competing with two automakers, and the government who's backing them up. What are we going to get out of it? So they asked to be included, although they didn't need it. The Treasury Department invested $80.7 billion from the $700 billion authorized by the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act. It recouped all but $10.2 billion. It both lent money and bought stock ownership in GM and Chrysler. In other words, the government bought stock in GM and Chrysler, not Ford. Okay. It also provided incentives to spur new car purchases, aka the Volt. Now, for those of you that don't know what the Volt is, it is the government telling a company what to do after giving them money. After GM took the money, the government said, because we're giving you money, we're going to dictate the pieces of shit you're going to build, and the Volt is going to be one of them. And Chevy did a smart thing by building a tremendous piece of shit, Volt, and a couple of hippies bought it. It also provided incentive, and it also, in effect, the government nationalized GM and Chrysler just as it did Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the American International Group. Do you know what that means? The government nationalized GM and Chrysler. They have a stake in the game. They own a part of both companies. That's right. The US government owns part of those companies. Now, in there, in the website, it pretty much tells you who took what and how much they basically got paid back for. So GM was given $51 billion. They sold basically stock back $39.7 billion. The government lost $11 billion. $11 billion. GMAC, which is like their finance company, 19.6 billion. I'm sorry, they took 17.2 billion. They took back in 19.6 because that's how loans work. The government made 2.4 billion. And Chrysler got 12 billion. They got back 11 billion, so the government lost. So the total investment between GM and Chrysler from the government was 80 billion. They got back 70 billion. They lost $10.2 billion. Nowhere in here does it state that Ford was given any money and then lost. Now, Ford was given loans, insanely low interest loans that they paid back. So in the second paragraph, it states, Ford Credit, not Ford Motor Company. Ford Credit received its bailout from the Term Asset-Backed Securities Loan Facility, not TARP. TARP was basically the bailout program. That was a government program for auto, student, and other consumer loans. So Ford Credit received bailouts, not Ford Motor Company. And then it talks about how Chrysler ended its bankruptcy and all this stuff. But nowhere in here, nowhere can I see that Ford received a bailout. A bailout means you get money and you're not asked to give it back. And basically the government has controlling interest in your company, meaning they got part of it, just like Carlito had some of Sasso's club when he gave him some money. So this pretty much ends the debate. You guys have to stop telling people that Ford took a bailout. Ford took a loan, GM and Chrysler took a bailout. Now, if you don't believe me, you can go on the internet and Google it, bailout versus loans, and that should end any debate any GM guy has about Ford also taking a bailout. GM and Chrysler took a bailout. Ford took a loan and paid it back, and they did not want to take any loans because they don't want to compete against the government owning GM and Chrysler. Hopefully this clears up the bailout situation, because if you believe everything that's on the internet, it's right there in front of you if you Google the right things. If you Google, hey, you could Google anything and end up with midget fisting porn. But at the end of the day, if you want some of the truth and facts, it's right there in front of you. Again, where I'm getting this from is from thebalance.com, auto industry bailout, GM Ford Chrysler. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll talk to you later.